Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. And if I may brag about myself for a moment, I am crushing it with these reviews lately. I have actually gotten multiple out in 1 month, which I haven't done in a while. I'm not going to say 2021 is fully turning around for me yet, but I was really enjoying all these books, so I've got that going for me. Today, I am reviewing Unearthly by Katie Jane Gallagher. This is a sci-fi retelling of Beauty and the Beast, and admittedly, I was slightly on the fence about accepting this one because I find Beauty and the Beast retellings to be one of the most overdone retellings of all time. I am pretty sure it has beaten out Cinderella by this point, especially in the modern age. And there's only so many times I want to see this archetype done, but I love sci-fi retellings. Really any sci-fi romances. I feel like sci-fi romances could be getting into a new age of prominence, at least in a small way, through the use of that one big sci-fi romance series getting big on Book Talk. And this could definitely have a place in that sphere. So, this is all about a young woman named Corinne who lives with her father in rural Montana. One day her father goes out hunting and doesn't come back, and she gets nervous and follows out after him. She stumbles across what is in essence an alien spaceship and gets sucked up into it to find her father trapped there. Now, for reasons she is not fully aware of at first, the alien dude, who is basically a beast, we do not know if that is because of a curse or some other altering thing, or if he is just that way because of his species. You don't see another member of his species throughout the entire thing, but he says that only one of them can stay. One of them must go, but one of them has to stay. And of course, our Belle insert Corinne is like, well, me, obviously. Yeah, I'll take his place. And so her father is whisked away, and again without saying goodbye, like in the original tale. And she is at first thrown into this holding cell, and then the usual stuff, she gets moved into a nicer room, and there is an AI that she talks things with who has a name she can't really decipher, so she just asks to call her Joanna because apparently this AI, in a usual sci-fi fashion, has downloaded the entire internet and has learned English and all about humans from that, which it can be sometimes just a really easy band-aid, or I guess an easy bridge to solve a lot of conflict in a sci-fi story. Just have someone download the internet and poof, we know English now. Poof, we understand things now. But honestly, it does kind of feel like an obvious first step, right? Like if you're a futuristic society that has that kind of technology and there's literally an entire web of information, wouldn't you tap into that? But I want someone to finally accept that a large portion of the internet is really dark and twisted stuff, like someone accidentally downloads the dark web into their AI, but that's beside the point. So Joanna is basically our Mrs. Potts insert. However, I really liked that she wasn't just wholly a one-dimensional good character, but while also upholding what is in essence captivity. Corinne spends a lot of time focusing on the fact that Joanna does technically serve the master, and how she is likely reporting on everything Corinne does. Also, for any dog lovers, Corinne does bring her dog Midge with her, so there is another lovely little bit with her. Although, I'm not gonna lie, part of me wonders if the dog was brought in because this is such a sparse cast. The majority of the book takes place on the ship, which is still hovering above Montana, because our beastly dude is on vacay, finding himself. And there's literally just Dell, our beast, Corinne, our Belle, Joanna, our Mrs. Potts, and that's it. And then the dog. But the dog doesn't talk. That'd be kind of fun though. Anyway, I did like how this story found a reason for Corinne to have to be there that was not the beast kidnapping her. There's a lot of sci-fi stuff that goes into it, but basically when her father stumbled across the ship registered another life form on it that it apparently already knew was humans. Apparently the wider world is aware of humans, but because it was aware of humans, what it calls a bellicose race, aka prone to war. When Corinne came on during this, like, mechanical issues, so the ship didn't register her, Del realizes that he can't have both of them on there. The ship's AI won't let him, but because one of them has already been registered and basically his people will be expecting him to bring a human back, one of them has to say and one of them has to go. And I get that that's kind of like a long-winded way to say, but like, yes, he was forced into saying, I have to have one of you and it can only be one of you, because apparently for some reason his race's law says that because humans are so warlike, two of them cannot be allowed to be on the same ship without one of them being killed or both of them being killed. Admittedly, it's a little bit of a plot contrivance in that way. It feels like they're working a little too hard to force our resident beast's hand so that he's not technically responsible for her captivity. But I'll let it stand. I get it. You don't actually want it to be like a kidnapping that the beast fully was active in. Now, there is a lot of time with Corinne spent just wandering the ship. And yes, there's cool stuff. And yes, she talks with Joanna. But this, I believe, led to one of the biggest struggles I had with the book. And really, actually, only real big struggle that I had with the book, aside from the plot hole of wouldn't Midge also be registered as a life force that wasn't there before, and wouldn't people be wondering why this second other life force entered after the first life force? But that's neither here nor there. Because there's so little action for such a large portion of the book, it tends to focus a lot more on the world building. And very obviously, the author has put a lot of thought into what is the Rume, the species, native planets, native world. I believe his country is called Alopt. And there's so much emphasis put on it, even though you don't actually see the planet or the country in this book. It's the ship does not leave Montana throughout the entire course of the story. And at times I was like, oh, this is really cool. But at other times it felt like the author was just showing off all of her world building. One of the biggest examples of this that I talked about in the written review was the greenhouse, hothouse, whatever you want to call it, the area of the ship where all of these plants grow, functionally just to give the ship oxygen. And there's all of this time in especially in one conversation in which, like, they're having a very long-winded conversation of flowers and plant types. And at one point, Corinne is sketching plant types, and it goes into depth of what they look like, what their names are, how to pronounce the names. And I did like that the book was constantly sliding in pronunciations for all the alien names. Like, it understood that these are made up words, so like the average reader isn't going to be able to suss out exactly how to pronounce them. The thing is that in the end, none of the flowers or plants really mattered in the grand scheme of things. It did bring up that one of the plants was vaguely poisonous, or like had a paralytic toxin that if Corinne brushed up against would like paralyze her as a human or something like that. But even that threat didn't necessarily come up. I trust that'll probably come up sooner. That feels like a threat you set up for later. This is a series, BT dubs. I probably should bring that up. And the biggest problem I had, though, was the fact that none of the other plants, this entire conversation and in-depth look into every single one of these plants, never comes up again. The biggest function of the hothouse, plot-wise, is that because it is so focused on nature and Joanna is an AI, it's the one place that Joanna can't get close to. That basically, by going into the center of this hothouse, away from the walls, Corinne can kind of get time alone and starts to use this extra time, this extra space from the AI to start plotting things. And I thought that was a really nice, like, addition, that this is a Belle that is actively, like, plotting how to escape, because no, I don't actually want to be trapped here. So that was a little bit aggravating at times, because it's like, okay, yeah, cool world building, but if you don't actually use it in the course of the story, all of that info will go out of the reader's head because, well, it's just a lot of info at one time. And unless something is reiterated repeatedly, you're not gonna remember it. Still, I do think that paralytic, mushroomy, luminescent thing will probably become a greater thing later on. But the biggest parts where the world building really comes into play is in the actual politics and culture of the Rume, in the aliens species in essence, because that comes in when Corinne and Del are basically trying to get to know each other. We have the dinner scenes, you know them well, and the differences in culture and the, you know, funny gaffes that they make, the funny faux pas that they make trying to understand each other are really endearing and really up the chemistry between the two. Del is not quite as brooding as I have seen some other Beast inserts be, and I really, really appreciate that. The chemistry is very much there, and it is very early on that he begins to take interest in her and understanding her and how the captivity has affected her, and he seems to really feel bad. Granted, it's still slightly contrived, but the fact that it wasn't his direct doing does help make him a lot more sympathetic a lot earlier on. So I'll give it a pass for that. In general, one of the things I really liked about this book is despite the fact that it was sci-fi, it really kept a lot of the same vibes that you would want from a Beauty and the Beast story. This ship, while yes, definitely being futuristic and everything is in shades of red and purple, even the plants, except for the luminescent blue ones, you could still get that same sense of like haunting loneliness from the place. You could definitely feel how alone she felt, and Joanna is a little bit bumbling, which does give some of the humanness to the character as opposed to a very strict, I am all about logic AI. She is meant to be like, I guess, like a really high sentient AI, and that adds a much needed extra character, because if there wasn't Joanna, this book would be probably boring, to be honest. That is a very needed character, and I, again, loved that it was not a perfectly, oh, I like this character, Stockholm relationship. Yes, the book brings up Stockholm Syndrome, and yes, if you know anything about Stockholm Syndrome, you actually know that the diagnosis of the disease originally, or syndrome, I guess, the diagnosis of the psychological thing actually has a lot of roots in sexism and may not be as real as pop culture at large has been led to believe it is. So I'll leave that discussion for another day. Regardless, I really appreciated Corinne's reactions to this, how even when she starts to make connections with Del, she's not immediately like, oh, okay, I guess I'm good leaving my home forever. Like, no, she's like, yeah, he's cool. I still don't want to leave Earth. And I love that. The ending, which I was nervous about at first, because whenever someone's like, oh, this is a romance series focusing on the same character in every book, I'm like, oh, they're going to do the thing where like everything's going well and then suddenly like there's a big relationship conflict that we have to resolve in the next book. There is a cliffhanger, there is a thing leading into the next book, but it's not them suddenly getting into a fight. And I'm really glad about that. And actually, without spoiling too much, I really liked the ending. It's admittedly more of a rom-com-esque trope, I think, and I'm not going to go into too much more detail beyond that, but it was really nice. And overall, I really enjoyed this book. I do have the sequel, and I will probably be moving on to that one eventually. I still have a lot of other books that have been on my list for way longer that I really need to get to, but in general, 4 stars. I would not say that this is necessarily a complete beginner's sci-fi. I usually do like to rate the sci-fi books I review based on their accessibility to complete beginners, because I know a lot of people are very nervous about sci-fi. Because of the sheer amount of world building and technology in this one, it's not as accessible as some others. However, if you love a good Beauty and the Beast retelling, you're gonna get what you love. There's even a little bit of a Gaston insert, although you only see him in the beginning and he's not really a big part of it, so good on that. I don't like a lot of focus on the Gaston inserts. Regardless, would highly suggest this one. It's a lovely little sci-fi romance. Now, I am actually going really well through my review list right now. I am even early on some books. I am feeling energized, as you can tell from my very upbeat vibe in this video. However, I am still going to be closed. I am going to understand my limits and give myself compassion and understanding that this has been a difficult year for me, and just getting through this year with a decent amount of catching up done will be good enough. And that's where we're at. But with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.